Hey, 4-Pack fans. We appreciate the support y'all have given us so far, and we want to give back. Beginning with this episode, we're running a giveaway for the month of July. Give us a subscribe on YouTube and comment Hot Take Summer on this or any video we post this month, and you'll be able to win $25 from one of us on CashApp. Multiple comments do not equal multiple entries, but if you guys want to stop in and chat, we won't stop you. Welcome in to the Sleepers episode of the Fantasy 4-Pack. I'm your host, Ian Power, joined as always by Frankie Santiago and Matt Vitale. Switched up the order this time to keep you guys on your toes. We are drinking something out of, I assume, the Czech Republic this week. Vitale, you want to introduce your beer to the viewers?
Yeah, I don't think it's out of the Czech Republic. It's actually from Moat Mountain is the brewery that makes it. They're out of Mount Washington up in New Hampshire. Got them from a little local brewery. Or not from the brewery, but a little local shop up there.
Wait, why is it called the Czech Pilsner? Oh, probably because it's the style.
It's the style.
Probably it's a style, you know, like Indiana, whatever.
Yeah.
Either way, it's solid. It's a little on the heavier side than I liked. I was hoping more of a kind of a fancy Bud Light, but it's all right.
I can settle for all right, especially after we've had to drink like ham and flour beer for your last two. So, as always, if you want to join us for future episodes, if you want to know when these things are coming out, subscribe to us on YouTube, hit that notification bell, follow us on Twitter at the Fantasy 4-Pack, or at our individual handles, F4P_Ian, The Foon, FPOON, and Senpai Koala. Getting some news before we get into the meat and potatoes of the show today. There was a lot of news items since we last talked, but they all kind of just wrap into one general topic, which is everyone's opting out of football. But so far there hasn't been anyone too major. I think the biggest one is the one that just dropped today. Damien Williams will not play this season. Huge news for CEH. I know I'm over the moon because I have him in Dynasty. CEH is an instant top 12 running back for me now. He should be flying up draft boards. I'd be taking him ahead of Eckler, Drake, Chubb, Mixon. He's gonna have usage in that offense. We know that offense always has a very heavy usage of their running back in both passing and actually running, and there's no one else there really to contest him for the job anymore.
Yeah, I like him a lot more now, but I'm still gonna keep that Darwin Thompson train just chugging in the back of my mind.
I think you might be the only person on that train.
Yeah. Also, this does affect your bus take. In case our viewers didn't see that.
I put a disclaimer on that video already. I made that CEH take before obviously Damien Williams opted out, so my take is sort of invalidated. Other major opt-outs that I've seen. Bunches of Funches isn't going to play, so a slight bump to Alan Lazard. The entire Patriots defense seems like it's opted out at this point, so probably don't draft them as a top 5 defense anymore. Nate Solder's opting out, so it doesn't really affect Saquon at all in my mind as far as where I'm drafting him, but maybe it affects Danny Dimes a little bit more. Just a reminder though, just keep an eye on who's opting out. You don't want to be the bozo who drafts an opted out player.
Yeah.
You guys have anything to add?
No, ideally we're probably, once it's all wrapped up, August 4th, we'll have a full list and be able to tell you the full impact of this.
Yeah. I'm crossing my fingers we don't lose anyone too major. Well, let's launch into a new segment for us today. It's one that's been a staple of the fantasy podcasting community, but it's our first time doing it. Let's do a little keep, trade, cut. I've prepared a couple lists of players for you guys. And I want to know which one you guys would keep on your team, which one you would trade away, and which one you would release to the Wolves. First group's going to be a bunch of third-round running backs, guys with their own unique question marks. Lenny Fournette, Chris Carson, and Mr. Ted Gurley himself.
This is definitely an interesting list. There's a lot of guys I'm usually not ending up with a lot of my positioning. Gurley, I usually end up having to reach for. But if I had all three of those guys, I'm probably going to go with keep Fournette. No, I'm going to keep Carson, cut Fournette, trade Gurley. Purely because I think Gurley has the sexiest name there. So I might like him a little bit better, but I think he's a better trade chip than Carson or Fournette. And Carson's just on a better team.
Frankie?
Yeah, I am I'm basically gonna flip Gurley and Carson. I don't think you can, like, after last year, I mean, Gurley definitely dumped in stock, which is why he went to the Falcons for so cheap on a small contract. So I'm going to keep him, trade Carson, and cut Fournette.
That's fair. I'm kind of in the same boat you are, mostly just from the standpoint of Gurley's the only one in that group that I have any real faith in as far as, being able to produce at a high level this season. I think Chris Carson just misses too much time and fumbles too much, and Leonard Fournette's Leonard Fournette. So I'm also a keep Gurley, cut Carson, or keep Gurley, trade Carson, and cut Fournette. Next group is a little bit tougher of a group as far as all of them having pretty strong upside going towards the first round for this one. Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, and Davante Adams. 3 guys who you could all potentially get in the back half of the first round, 8 to 12. And guys who you realistically will probably have to choose over the other because they won't be there when your next pick comes back around.
You want to take the floor first on this one, Frankie?
All right, so... Man, it's really hard in the first round, but
I set it up like that for you.
I would say I'm going to keep Nick Chubb. I'm going to trade Joe Mixon, and I'm going to cut Davante Adams.
Okay, why?
I think running back's just the more important position, so I'm willing to give up that wide receiver and go out for another guy that I can get for cheaper, who can arguably have the same volume and potential for touchdowns. Joe Mixon, he's more of that. He's got those fresh legs. He's young, and he's no Nick Chubb, but I'm obviously going to keep the stud of the group, which is Nick Chubb.
I'm quite different from you on that one. Honestly, I'm going to keep Mixon. I'm going to trade Davante and cut Chubb. Chubb is a guy that I keep waffling back and forth on as the season goes, and I don't know, there's just something about having a top running back behind you on your depth chart that just scares me enough. Like I know we have Kamara who had Ingram behind him, but Kamara, Ingram does not compare to Kareem Hunt and what he could do on the Chiefs offense. I think for me personally, I'm really interested in what Joe Mixon can do. He's just a consistent guy who's always in that RB1 conversation. And Davante Adams, he's a top quality receiver, and the only reason he's down this year is because of the injury he had last year.
Yeah, honestly, I'm in a similar boat to Vitali. I'm obviously keeping Nick Chubb because I agree. You don't trade away or cut the stud of the group. His rushing volume is, I don't project it as slipping at all. He's obviously not going to be as big of a passing game threat as I would like, but that's what happens when you have Hunt on the team. Mixon, while I love the upside with him, it is a new quarterback with the Bengals. I don't necessarily 100% trust that offense, and there is a world where Mixon just doesn't perform because Burrow doesn't perform, and that entire offense is sluggish. For me, it's you keep Chubb, you trade Adams, who is arguably one of the best receivers in the league, maybe the best receiver in the league, depending on who you talk to. You trade him, and you unfortunately have to cut Mixon there. And then for our last bunch, speaking of wide receivers, we're going to the 4th round this time, looking at some guys who are being drafted basically back to back to back. With Calvin Ridley, Courtland Sutton, and Juju. Curious to see what you guys think about them, guys who all present their own unique upside, all pretty young in their own respective systems.
If you don't mind, I'll take this one because this one actually is surprisingly easy for me. They may all be going the same area, but these guys, when I just at a quick glance, don't have the same value at all to me. I keep Juju, I trade Ridley, I cut Sutton. Easy because Juju was in the conversation of having wide receiver 1 upside with Big Ben last year, and like I said, we had the colossal failure of that team because of the lack of quarterback play. I just think Juju still has that. It's a longer shot now, but he still has that.
So the fact that you finished outside the top 50 doesn't scare you?
No. Okay. 0. Like I said, when the Duck Hodges and the guy missing half his brain are your quarterbacks, I expect you to play poorly, and I think they're going to try and address that as soon as possible to get someone who can at least back up properly. But when I go between Ridley and Sutton I think has a better carved out role as the 1, but he also has a guy who's playing, taking over for the first time in a full season. I do love Drew Lock, but I think Matty Ice has the potential to produce more points, and I think the hype train for Calvin Ridley is as high as it's going to be. So trading him right now is, you can get some hefty value back.
Sure, that's fair. Frankie?
I agree with pretty much everything, except I would flip Ridley and Juju. I mean, I think Juju does have that sexy name still, and I mean he still is capable of being that top guy. So trade him away, you're probably getting a decent amount for him. And Ridley, I mean, you guys know how much I love Calvin Ridley.
The Ridley stand, yeah.
I'm surprised that none of us are on Cortland Sutton because I'm actually the same as you, where I'm keeping Juju, cutting Calvin, or trading Calvin and cutting Cortland. I agree. Calvin Ridley has far exceeded my expectations as far as how fast his hype train can accelerate. I love the discount you're getting on Juju. I think that the talent is still there. And Cortland Sutton, there's too many kind of like the Bengals. There's too many question marks in that offense for me. I think he will still do fine, but if I have to cut one of the three of them, it's him.
Exactly. It's I don't hate Sutton. He's just, of those three, I like him the least.
Okay. Well, I guess I'm kind of surprised with some of you guys' takes on a few of them, but I guess I really shouldn't have been. But that's all I had for the keep trade cut segment. So we'll revisit that in the future. We'll do some different groupings. Maybe get some later round players in there. But what do you guys say we jump to the meat and potatoes of the show now? We go straight into the sleeper segment.
Let's get into it.
It's gonna be a nice dinner.
Vital, you want to take us away?
Sure. Why not? I'll go with a guy. So I'll start with the highest guy on mine. I actually went for a little bit low ball for the ADP. Starting with a man who is currently, per Fantasy Pros ADP calculation, he's the wide receiver 66, Mr. Alan Lazard. So when I was first constructing this and looking at Lazard, I was projecting it with Funches in there. Funches is now gone, so I think that just only boosts him, and hopefully his ADP doesn't rise to where he stops being of value. But when you look at Lazard, we have had a quarterback in New England for a long time who has the syndrome of, if I trust you, you're getting balls, you're getting a lot of them. And if he doesn't trust you, you might as well be a ghost. Rodgers is the same way. When Devontae Adams, he always had the talent. He just had an issue with the dropsies when Jordy Nelson was still there, so Jordy kept getting those looks. Lazard's there for another year, and even if something happens and Funches is back on this team, I don't expect Funches with a very shortened preseason to make any significant impact with Rodgers, who's already probably looking out the door with the Packers and looking to just pad some stat line and either get it on a contract on a new team or just retire. So I'll take the guy who is the locked-in number 2 right now for Aaron Rodgers, and if for some reason Devontae Adams is injury-prone, which I don't think he's going to be, you could then have the number 1 for Aaron Rodgers, who's in his second year. Lazard, like I said, his performance last year was definitely respectable. We all were on the Geronimo Allison train and whatnot last year and kind of slept on Lazard. And
St. Brown.
Exactly. But just last year alone, like, he showed you he has the talent to do this. And I think with another year on his belt and more comfortability with Rodgers, there's no reason why you can't pick him up, scoop him up in a late round, and he could be a guy who sneaks into that wide receiver 3 conversation, especially for those wide receiver 2-3 receiver leagues, or if you only have 2 receivers, he could be a very nice flex play week to week.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, he's somebody who I've been ending up with in a lot of best ball drafts so far this year. He's barely being respected at all in leagues where you're drafting down to, the 18th to 20th bench spot. I don't really get it. I share a lot of your sentiment on him. I think that he's an easy grab for me in those late rounds where you're really just picking guys aside from him, people who have a lot of them don't even sure lock in their offense as far as any sort of production at all. You look at him, he does sort of at least have Rodgers' eye. He's got the step up on the other receivers.
Yeah, I'm pretty much in the same boat. I mean, like, we liked Lazard last year, not as much as we liked Geronimo Allison, and we saw how that train went. But I think he's in a very good position to see that volume and see that touchdown volume, more importantly, especially with a guy like Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football. I agree that I think he's being disrespected in respects, just not being drafted or being drafted super late.
But Frankie, how's he going to see the touchdown volume if Aaron Jones is going to get 57 touchdowns?
He's only...
I
yield my time.
But yeah, it's like I said, when you're taking Lazard, he's the 185th player via ADP. Yeah. He's not hurting your team, even if he completely busts. That's my big thing for him.
Yeah, fair point. I'm going to step up a few rounds from you, go into the middle of the 7th round with my guy. But he's someone who he's been moving up a little bit too, and I'm still shocked that he hasn't moved up more. Current ADP of 90, so dead middle of the 7th. Wide receiver 36 off boards, Mr. Brandin Cooks. Freshly traded to Houston. He's on like his 18th team now or something like that. It's hard to keep track at this point. He's collecting the jerseys.
I think it's 5.
Yeah, this is 5. No, 4, excuse me. But I'm gonna just start you guys off with his stats for the last couple of years. 129 targets, 84 receptions, 1,138 yards, 9 touchdowns. 117 targets, 78 receptions, 1,173 yards, and 8 touchdowns. 114 targets, 65 receptions, 1080 on the yards, and 7 touchdowns. And then a $117, 80 receptions, 1,204 yards, and 5 touchdowns. I left out his rookie year in that sample because it doesn't really factor in at all. Obviously, rookies don't really perform, especially when he was coming into the league. But that sample shows how consistent Cooks has been able to be over his 6-year career in the NFL. Now, obviously, last year was a down year for him. He only had 72 targets, 42 catches, 583 yards, and 2 touchdowns. But even with that factored, he still has a 65% catch rate to accompany the numbers. And he was just traded to a team that just vacated 150 targets when they unceremoniously shipped DeAndre Hopkins out of town. I don't really understand why people just don't want to draft this perennially unwanted player. I mean, he's on a team that has a ton of vacated targets, one of the best quarterbacks in the league. He's been great over his 6-year career. You know, despite moving teams, it seems like almost every year, he always puts up numbers. He has one down year, and everyone's shouting from the rooftops that Brandin Cooks is done. I don't get it. You can't find a guy with his upside in the 7th round typically. And it's not even upside really with him, because if you just look at history, you know he's most likely going to regress short of injury. He's most likely going to regress to that 115, 120 target range. And he's probably going to be able to turn in like a solid mid to high end wide receiver 2, maybe low end wide receiver 1 return for you, despite where he's going, because we've seen him do that before. This is someone who I'd be comfortable locking up around earlier when he's going. He should be going in at least the 5th round, but he's not. I'm trying to get him in as many leagues as I can this year.
Yeah, I think that there's just a general disrespect going to that Houston team. I think it's partially due to the terrible trade of Hopkins and some of the more aged people they're bringing on the staff. But, I mean, Watson's still there, and I think he's one of the more talented. I feel like he's one of the more slept-on talented quarterbacks in this league, because I think he is a more complete quarterback, akin to Russell Wilson, with a little bit more running ability. I still have him, maybe not as good in fantasy, but I think he's still going to be a great quarterback, and I completely agree. He's, Cooks is someone we're sleeping on.
Once that I actually forgot to mention too, he's actually being drafted 4 picks after his fellow wide receiver Will Fuller.
Yeah, I have noticed that they are going in about the same range, and I'm kind of on the same boat as you, where he's just so consistent, and Fuller just hasn't been. I don't see why he's being drafted behind Fuller, even though he had that, obviously, the bad year. But, I mean, that's going to happen. You're just going to get unlucky like that.
One bad year does not a bad player make.
Yeah. But everything else, I mean, Watson's in town now that, I was shitting on Watson before that he had no targets, but now he has Brandin Cooks to throw to, who I definitely trust more than Will Fuller.
Frankie, who you got for your first sleeper?
Well, I'm gonna start at the back of my list and go forward. So Vitale thought he was deep diving. I'm gonna go all the way down to a guy who is being undrafted in some formats. ADP of 211 and the running back 58. I'm talking about Mr. Damien Harris here. Sorry for misspeaking.
Damien Williams, a sleeper for 2021.
But I mean, if you had told me like in 2019 that Damien Harris is going to be the starting running back for the Patriots after what we saw, which is next to nothing, I would have kind of just laughed at you. Sonny Michel obviously had a stranglehold on that run game with 247 carries. But with Sonny coming off of an ankle surgery, which is probably one of the more surgeries you don't want to have for a running back. It's definitely
Your ankles are important.
yes, especially when you make those cuts. But Sonny's already proven he's not like a fully injury prone. I think that with the way things are moving, especially with COVID as well, I mean, we may see Sonny opt out just to get that time to recoup. And even if he doesn't, there's no guarantee he's going to be healthy all season. And if he gets injured again, well then, I mean, I would say that Damien Williams is in a prime spot. Even if he takes like just the same role that Sonny did, he's shown he can be more efficient. Because I mean, Sonny was only averaging 3 yards on a carry and 57 yards a game. I mean, those aren't mind-blowing numbers. And in an offense, I mean, we don't know how Cam's going to play. I mean, I don't trust him. So it may be, I mean, who knows? You're getting him for literally nothing. You might be able to get him on the waiver wire in week 1. But you may have a starting running back that you're getting for no cost.
Yeah. I do love Damien Harris this year. He's a 3rd-round pick that for some reason just didn't get used, and I think that was just more akin to the mess that was the Patriots behind the scenes last year. And on top of that, you're looking at a guy who could be, even if his yardage isn't there, he could be that guy who sneaks in and becomes the next LeGarrette Blount, where you can see him put up 8 touchdowns and like 700 yards. And for a flex guy, that's all you need. He'll be pulling in weeks that you'll be very happy with. So, yeah, I'm definitely on the Damien Harris train.
I actually am as well. I've made, as a New England fan, obviously I get more exposure to the Sony hate than probably a lot of the country. You turn on sports radio and you can hardly go find a station that isn't talking about how much Sony sucks. I mean, last season he averaged a pedestrian 3.7 yards per carry. And you know who doesn't need ankles to make cuts? Bill Belichick. There's a situation where he's not on the roster to start the year because his knees are garbage, his ankle's garbage. They obviously like Damien Williams. They wouldn't have drafted him. I mean, if Damien Williams Damien Harris. Excuse me. You said Damien Williams, and I got it on the brain now. If Damien Harris shows out in what little they have of camp and preseason this year, or if, Sony Michel just farts it up the first couple of weeks and does nothing, there's a situation where he's not on the Patriots, going into week 4, and all of a sudden this guy who you just found on the waiver wire, or you drafted with your last pick in your draft, is a starting running back on a offense that should be a good running team. There. Patel, you want to jump to your next guy here?
Yeah, I was actually going with a different route for my next guy, but I think what I'll go for is to show you up, because you wanted to talk big about how deep you were going. I can go deeper.
Oh, wait till you see my next 2 picks.
So your guy was up, 208.
My next two picks.
I'm going to go with the guy who's currently 227. Average draft at 208. He is the current wide receiver 76. Mr. Randall Cobb. So that's why I was glad you were talking about Mr. Cooks over there on Houston. I also am ready to buy in on a guy for Houston, who's a much more safe sleeper for our fans out there. Cobb, we've seen year in, year out as a just tried and true slot receiver. Never too flashy, but always consistent. He went to a team with a lot of mouths to feed in the Dallas Cowboys, and then after his year, he made his way on over to Houston, where they paid him. They didn't pay him an insignificant amount. 3 years, 27 million guaranteed, 27 million, 18 guaranteed. But looking at this guy, when I look at his offense, he is the locked-in slot receiver for Watson. And when you look at it, what has this team always been riddled with? Wide receiver injuries. Kiki Kuti, Will Fuller. And now they just added another guy who his brain has been turning to jelly year after year because of the amount of concussions he gets. So there's this situation where you could see 2, maybe all 3 of them go down. But who played 15 games last year? The vet, 15-year Randall Cobb. So people might say, oh, what about Kenny Stills? He might take the spot. Well, they're not going to roll out Cooks, Kuti, or Fuller and Stills. Those guys all do the same thing. They need someone to mix it up and take those intermediate over the top routes. And if Watson isn't able to click with his new receivers, like Cooks, he might just dump it off to the guy who's taking those easy short routes over the middle. So you can easily see a guy who is always flirted with that 100 target range, who is now coming to a team that just vacated over 100 and something targets, 120, 150. Sorry, 150 he could really carve out a role on this team, and I could easily see him getting close to that 100 target market again. And he's only they said wide receiver 76. If you take him with one of your last picks, a la Damien Harris, put him on your bench, he could by week 3, week 4 be once again a very usable flex guy for you.
I mean, honestly, he's someone you don't even have to draft. He's someone who you could just ignore him, just tag a little watch flag on him, and then if someone goes down or if you just want to try and cut it off, maybe he's one of those guys that you pick up right before the week starts every week in case one of them gets injured.
Yeah, but then you got to play the gamble of are you more in on somebody else, especially if you're working with fab budget. I would just say take him your last pick.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely a situation I could see where Brandin Cooks and Randall Cobb are the 1 and 2 in a very productive Texans offense. So I don't hate that take at all, especially what you have to invest again.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Texans were a great landing spot for him. I do think that he is going to be that primary slot receiver as well. I've always been a fan of slot receivers because they do seem to eat, i.e. Cooper Kupp and the like. But I agree with pretty much everything you said. He is. I'm also convinced he's pretty much been playing forever.
As I recall, when he on the league, actually, he was what started the slot receiver jokes. So.
Yeah, like I said, he is just a consummate pro. He knows what he's doing. He's played this role for years. He's cheap. He's not gonna be a sexy pick. No one's gonna be like, "Whoa, you got him." It's just gonna be like a couple weeks.
Yeah, if something goes wrong.
Exactly.
All right, so I'm gonna follow the trend that you guys have been setting. I'm gonna dive real deep for this one. Gonna go all the way down to ADP 94. Middle of the 7th again, 7.8. Running back 35. Ronald Jones the second. I mostly focus on the middle rounds for my sleepers because I've got a lot of guys I feel like are very misvalued in there. And Ronald Jones has been someone who seems like the fantasy community is coming around on. His value actually has been rising over the past couple weeks. But it's still not high enough for me. So here we go. Let's try and get his hype train kick-started. Jones started his career slow, obviously. Only managed 23 carries in his first season with the Bucs. But I feel like people kind of carried that into last year. They're looking at him way too harshly for what he actually was able to do last year. And essentially, it was a 50-50 split with Peyton Barber. This guy finishes the RB25. He racked up, 1030 as far as yards from scrimmage. So not insignificant. A decent part of that was passing work, too. 40 targets, 31 receptions. It's basically 2 receptions a game. It's nothing to write home about. But on the upside, he's no longer splitting time with Peyton Barber. That's 24 targets right there that are up for grabs. He also spent the offseason training. He's put on 68 pounds of... 6 to 8, not 68. 6 to 8... He's the Hulk now.
That's a big boy.
He's put on 6 to 8 pounds of muscle. He's been working on his catching. He's been reportedly catching 300 balls a day as part of his training regimen. And to cap it all off, his GM praised him this offseason, saying they have more faith than ever than him. And that came after they drafted a guy in the 3rd round in Keyshawn Vaughn. I'm really not worried about the rookie stealing his job. I mean, they only paid a 3rd round pick for Vaughn. And it sounds like Jones knows what his deficiencies are. He's been working really hard to step them up. He's put on the extra weight. It's going to make him a more effective blocker. We know how much Brady likes blockers. He's been working on those hands. We know how much Brady likes to throw to his running backs. And we know how much Brady hates rookies. I mean, it's all just shaping towards this being a guy who should be an easy top 24 running back, who's being drafted as the running back 35. I mean, if he stays in this range, if he stays outside the top 24, I'm happy taking him for my team, especially if I'm someone who needs running back depth going into those later rounds, because he's someone who could easily not be just a flex guy for you, but be, a low to mid-end running back 2, I think. Maybe high-end running back 2. I don't really know what his ceiling is, but that's probably about as high as I'd be comfortable saying he could go.
Yeah, I mean, you know how much I love me some Ronald Jones. and how much I've always loved me some Ronald Jones. But I think that I pretty much agree with everything you said. I think that Brady is the thing that's kind of like putting a little pep in his step, so to speak. I did like that I saw him working out and working on his receiving work, and the fact that he's getting praise from his coach is even better. I don't. GM. Probably both. I would imagine the GM's coaching. Whatever. Anyways, my point is that I have all the faith in Ronald Jones. And if I'm paying that much for him, I mean, I'm taking him there every single time.
Yeah, I'm probably the coolest on him compared to you two who are always fighting over him in our mock drafts. Ronald Jones definitely sits in a group where he is the shiniest of that bottom tier guys. Like Cam Akers, I don't have faith, especially after them talking about they want to just use all their running backs. So you're definitely getting a guy who should have the starting job in these later rounds. So if you're a guy who wanted to try and grab a tight end early or go double wide receivers in round 2, 3, this might be the guy you look at. I both have the positive look at it and negative. We know Brady is one of the best out of play action. So they're going to need to focus on having a solid run if Brady wants to run that again. We could see a completely different system out of Arians, but I would think if Arians is smart, he'll try and run to his quarterback strengths. But I also see where I never like when a guy has to 50-50 share with Peyton Barber, who I think less of than Ronald Jones. And there's always been that stigma of Ronald Jones being on the slower side. So putting on more muscle, hopefully it's, going to make him a little faster than he was before. So for me, it's kind of like little plus, little negative. I'm probably going to miss out on him because I'm not going to be buying him a little bit earlier. He's a guy that maybe if he falls to me, I'll take him. But I definitely see your points.
Also, he actually had really good burst. It's just he's not good at breaking tackles. But to what you said too, if you go especially zero running back early, he's someone you should be focusing on over everyone else. Frankie, I know you've got another interesting one in store for us here. You want to close out our second round of sleepers with your
the match
next guy?
The match vitality at not a super deep.
You guys just racing to the bottom.
Not a super deep dive. It's a little bit higher. It's at 198, so sub 200. The wide receiver 62, Mr. Parris Campbell. I like him a lot this year, and it's because he's got a new toy in town in Phillip Rivers. If you look at who he had last year, I mean, he only got 24 targets out of Brissett, and if you look at Rivers historically, only had less than 525 attempts in the last 10 years, and under 4,250 in that same span once. I mean, he might get games scripted out, or rather, the Chargers being the
Colts.
reason.
I'm sorry, what was that?
The Colts getting games.
Brain fart. Some will argue that the Rivers throwing so much was because of the game script with the Chargers only having above a 500 record once in the last
there
five.
You go.
In the last five. There, I've refocused. But which brings us to Mr. Campbell. He is taking over primary slot duties, a position which Phillip Rivers has liked his entire career. And if you just look at the volume that he's going to get compared to last year, I mean, Chester Rogers, even last year when he was struggling, still had 40 targets. Prior to that, he had 70 and 80. So that's a pretty good share of the offense. Rivers isn't afraid to go out there and throw the ball. Brissett was obviously the safer quarterback. And I think that with all the volume that is going to be out there to get, I mean, especially with T.Y. getting up there in age, I mean, Zach Pascal, I mean, he's Zach Pascal. He might be the number two. He might end up being the number 2 in that team. Honestly, he might end up being the number 1 on the team if T.Y. struggles and has injury problems.
Yeah, as you guys have probably seen if you've watched our draft videos, I've been taking Parris Campbell a lot with those late round flyers. Like I said, I just want to buy in on a guy who could take over for T.Y. if T.Y. goes down. And I've seen a lot of hype for the Michael Pittman on that team because of his size, but I just want to caution everyone. I mean, we're getting nothing for a preseason, basically no training camps. So rookie wide receivers already struggle with a full preseason and training camps and all that. Now you're cutting that out. I can't see a world where Pittman puts up enough production that I feel like he supplants Parris Campbell, where I don't believe he is a value. I mean, yes, he's got the size to be an end zone threat, but I feel like we had that same conversation about, N'Keal Harry. Granted, he had injuries, but just because they have the size doesn't mean it turns into production.
I don't really have anything else to add to that. I like Parris Campbell the same way you guys do. I think that he's a fine late round target. He's someone who, if the value rises on him too much, I'm not interested at all. But where he's going, sure, I have no issue.
Yeah. So seeing as we're doing our deep dives, who's your deep dive?
Oh, my deep dive?
Yes, your really deep dive.
Ooh, all right. I went way down here, all the way to the middle of the 9th round.
Woo!
ADP 113, wide receiver 44, Diontae Johnson.
Like it?
A lot of people like it, actually. The hype train, I would say, has already left the station on this kid, and it's been gathering speed since last season, if we're being fair. I mean, he had a very good year for a rookie. He actually managed to outperform Juju to the tune of 92 targets, 59 catches, 680 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Somehow this really hasn't affected his draft position at all. I mean, his draft stock has stayed constant. He's just sitting outside of wide receiver 3 territory. This is despite the fact that he now is a real QB throwing in the ball, not, like you were talking about earlier, Mason Rudolph or Devlin Hodges, who we can say are objectively bad quarterbacks. On top of that, when you factor in how much the Steelers throw with Big Ben under center, I mean, the last 7 years, he's been over 500 attempts every year except for 2 of them. And the 2 years that he wasn't, he missed large chunks of those years. So, unless you're projecting another injury that's going to, sidebar his season or derail his season, Big Ben's going to throw, because that's what Big Ben does. He's an old dog, you don't teach him new tricks, whatever the saying is. And we've seen that offense be able to support 2 quality fantasy wide receivers before in the past, especially, like in 2018, the thing that gave Juju all that hype when he and Antonio Brown both put up monster seasons, when they were both inside the top 10 at wide receiver. I love where Diontae Johnson's going. I love that he's the second man in that offense because they obviously don't trust James Washington. They wouldn't have drafted that new kid, Claypool, whatever his name is. He has too much going for him, in my mind, to ignore him. And especially when you're looking at where he's going. I mean, he's going next to backups and guys that have, no real hold on their offense, like Parris Campbell or Alan Lazard. I mean, I don't know. The final thing I have to say about him is that, it's not just the fantasy community that's in love with him. The Steelers also were in love with him when they drafted him. I mean, R.I.P. Darryl Drake, but he's their ex-wide receivers coach. He unfortunately died in last August, but after the draft, he had this to say about Diontae Johnson. He said, "I'm very excited about Diontae Johnson. Not only is he a tremendous football player, but a tremendous young man. He's the most natural catcher I've seen in a while. I think he's a guy that Steeler Nation is going to be very, very excited about." And this is a guy who was a wide receiver coach. So, I mean, he had wide receiver coaches raving. He was obviously a talent that was taken in the top 3 rounds of that 2019 draft. He performed really well last year. It's just the stars are aligning for this guy to turn in what could be a top 24 season. He's being drafted almost double below that. He's an easy take everywhere you can this year for me.
Yeah, I've been on the Diontae Johnson. I'm right there on the train with everybody else, and like I said, I'm more so even on the train for the Steelers to make a comeback. And like I said, what you said, the Steelers have always been able to support 2 receivers, and I have no reason to believe that they won't be able to. So I could see a world where I have both of them if Diontae is cheap enough. And then just side fact, Diontae has a great football name, Diontae Johnson. That just sounds like a guy who's going in the hall.
Well, and we've actually talked real fast before you go for it. We actually talked about stacking before, and this is a very easy stack to own on your team if you want to try that, because Juju's going in the 4th, Big Ben's going in the 10th, Diontae's going in the 9th. I mean, you could easily own that entire offense, and half the offense costs you nothing. Where if they fail, you just cut them.
Yeah, I think that a guy who has, seen Antonio Brown and Juju as a wide receiver coach speaking volumes to Diontae Johnson is.
The Steelers are generally known as a team that develops pretty good wide receivers.
Yeah, I think that
Emmanuel Sanders came from that team.
Yeah, I think that him speaking like highly of Diontae Johnson is honestly probably the biggest attractor for me. Is like somebody from the inside, not just like the fantasy community, is like praising him. And I mean, like you said, his price is pretty cheap too. I mean, anybody who has that high potential as wide receiver too, being that cheap is like that. I'm attracted to that.
Yeah, I have no issues with you guys' takes. All right, Vitaly, take us away with your player from this final groups of 3.
Oh, I'm glad, Frankie, you decided to break up the rotation. It's almost like you wanted this secretly. You don't like. I'm coming at you with AJ Dillon once again, attacking my guy. You're going to repeat his touchdown king crown. AJ Dillon.
I respectfully disagree before you start.
Yeah, I get you're gonna respectfully disagree, but you're just gonna deep down you're gonna know that this kid is here to destroy my guy. Your flag plant, consider it pulled. But AJ Dillon, 2nd round draft pick. He is not getting anywhere near the respect as all the other 2nd round. Jonathan Taylor, until recently, was going in the 4th round in mock drafts. CEH is about to climb, more deservedly so, up into that high 2nd round slot. So when we get a top quality offense, granted they're more of a passing team, who drafts a guy in the 2nd round, they do have an established back, but yet we're drafting this guy at 170. Like, he is coming off right now as the running back 57. So not only is he basically free right now, he's a guy who has a pedigree behind him. Like, the more I dig in on this kid, the more I like him. I mean, not just because he went to Boston College, but I mean, he didn't have just one. He had 2 seasons of 1,500 yards plus in his 2017 and his 2019 season. So just looking at this kid, he's a bruiser of a back who scored 38 touchdowns in 3 years. 14, 10, 14. So the Packers may have just brought him in for this year to be a bruiser back, but if he's getting all the touchdowns and he's getting that short yardage work, we can see Aaron Jones, his value, if he's only between the 20 guys, that's going to drop. But if they actually really like A.J. Dillon as much as a 2nd round pick, as we see with other teams, this kid could really turn in easy flex value for you if he's turning in, 6, 7 touchdowns and 800 yards. Like I said, he could be a cheap LeGarrette Blount. And I just think it's crazy that we're not respecting a running back who, on a team that has time and time again produced guys in the top 2 rounds in fantasy. Both, Eddie Lacy during his time, Aaron Jones now when we wanted to believe in him. Exactly. It's so when I look at this kid, I just see everything there. That yes, it was a dumb draft pick for them because they didn't need him, but he's there now, so I'm gonna look at him accordingly.
So, Frankie, I'm going to run with this, and then because I only have a shorter thing to say, then I'm going to let you fight back, because I know
I don't have that much to say,
Vitaly is threatening your love. I'm actually kind of in the same camp as you, Vitaly. I think that he is being incredibly disrespected given what he did in college and also what we've seen from the Packers. To me, it stems most from a standpoint of people don't like to imagine bad things happening. So they don't. They don't want to think about the fact that Aaron Jones might not have the hold on his job. So they aren't going to think about it. This kid is out of sight, out of mind because Aaron Jones is the bay of the fantasy community. But there's comparisons out there of this kid being like the new Jordan Howard, who has been a very good running back in fantasy for years. Like the comparisons I've seen go all the way up to someone like a Derrick Henry, where he's not going to do a lot for you in the passing game, but he's a dangerous kid on the ground when you put the ball in his hands because he's slippery and he's big and he's hard to take down. So I mean, there's a legitimate chance here where he turns in RB2 values or RB1 if Aaron Jones goes down, because we know the Packers are going to use him and they wouldn't have drafted him if they didn't feel they had a need for him. Especially where he's going, it's crazy. It's crazy to me that he's getting the amount of shade that he is.
Just as a disclaimer, I do have both of them in our Dynasty League. So I'm not
Hedging your bets. I see how it is.
I'm not particularly
So you already feel the fear.
I'm being safe. But I would say that it is easier to get touchdowns in college.
Safe's a funny way to spell afraid.
My only rebuttal. It's easier to get touchdowns in college. And Aaron Jones is that guy. That's all I'm gonna say. I'm gonna let you kind of marinate in your take, and then
Like they say it's fine if you wanna just go ahead and build up the stats, whatever take you want to come back at me with. But at the end of the day, for your take to win out over mine, my guy is the last pick you will take in your draft. Yours could potentially be the first pick.
it's gonna be the 8th pick in our draft. I'm just know now.
Frankie, do you know he did in college?
Yeah, but how I just wrote it. Well, I mean, you ran the numbers by it, but I don't have.
Are you gonna reference him breaking a record?
I was just going to say 35 games, 845 carries, 4,382 yards. That's 5.2 yards per carry. He was very good in college.
It's a lot easier to be good in college than the NFL.
Oh,
right,
for sure.
But it's hard to be good in the NFL if you weren't good in college.
Yes, but I respectfully.
Frankie, take us away with your last player.
Well, I mean, I don't really have a lot to say about this guy, and he is at a
Cool, it's a wrap then.
He's at a very high ADP of 135, and the tight end's 16 off the board. I think it's our first tight end of the show, actually. So
It is.
I'm happy that I brought
well,
this
for
guy
this
too.
segment, it is.
Jonnu Smith. I mean, you guys would agree that Bill Belichick knows his tight ends. He likes to use them pretty frequently.
He's all right.
He's been pretty good with them.
He was one of the. He himself has stated that Jonnu Smith in that game before the playoffs last year, that Jonnu Smith was going to be a factor. And while he was more of a streaming like matchup type guy, barring the health of Delanie Walker last year, Delanie Walker's out of town.
Yeah, he's been a cuck to fantasy values on that team for years.
Yeah, last year tight ends amassed a total of 109 or 107. Sorry, I misspoke. Targets on the Titans, and a guy who had probably about a third of those targets is gone. So he's going to see that uptick in volume. He's increased his volume, not his volume, his production every year on about the same amount of volume that he's been getting. If Derrick Henry isn't that guy who's going to be running the ball in when they're out to 20, Jonnu's 6'3", 250. He's going to be that end zone threat. He's going to be that guy that Tannehill's looking to, or whoever's quarterbacking that team if they decide to move on. He's averaging 12.5 yards a reception, so he's getting those first downs. He's keeping that offense on the field. I think that that's one of the biggest attractors for me is he's not just getting that 9 yards and just being like, all right, well, offense is off the field. No more fantasy points for you. Actually, another fun fact, i.e. Fantasy Pros. The only 3 teams that have finished in top 12 scoring for tight end over the last 5 years are the Chiefs, obviously with Travis Kelce, the Eagles with Zach Ertz and whoever else is playing fiddle to him, and the Titans. And I think that speaks, well, one, volumes to Delanie Walker and how underrated he's been, but also, 2, to the potential for Jonnu Smith to be that next guy.
I couldn't disagree more.
All right.
Interesting.
It's not that I dislike Jonnu Smith. I think he'd be very good on a better team. I just don't think the Titans pass enough to have Jonnu Smith having any sort of value in that offense because we've already gone over the fact that A.J. Brown's going to pop. A.J. Brown can't pop if Jonnu Smith is also popping. Every offense in the NFL isn't made equal. The Titans are not an offense that can support more than one fantasy star. So unless your idea of a sleeper is 4 catches for 45 yards and sometimes he gets a touchdown a la Jason Witten, he's just a guy to me. He's just a guy who's sitting there after the true breakouts at the position and the true values of the position have gone off the board, and you're like, well, I guess I'll take Jonnu, kind of like a Kyle Rudolph or a Jason Witten of yesteryear. We're like, yeah, he's young, he's athletic, I like what he brings to the table. Don't like the fact that his team sometimes throws 14 times a game.
Yeah, I'm honestly middling. I do like Jonnu quite a bit. it's hard to not like a guy when Belichick, literally calls him one of the best after the catch in the league when he knows of, Travis Kelce, Kittle, all these other guys. And he clearly has an eye for the tight end position because he's, hit on it pretty regularly. But when I look at Jonnu, I see the talent. I see an upgraded quarterback, which should help him. I see the vacation of targets, but I also see the lack of passing. So if I look at it the way I'm statting out the Titans, they are going to throw a little more, and they're going to run a little less, ideally, because they don't want to absolutely abuse the running back they just paid. So I could see a realm where maybe they're getting 26, 27 pass attempts, but it's going to be rare. There's going to be games where when they're playing bad teams, they're just going to stay up on them, and they're just going to run. So I do believe he would qualify for me as a sleeper because he's going so late in drafts, but he is a risky guy. I think he doesn't have the shine that some other tight ends like a Hawk, like a Fant have to me, where I'd rather just gamble on them.
I was going to say, 'cause let me ask you this too. Based on where he's going, yes, he's technically a sleeper in his draft value, but unless you're overdrafting one of these other guys, it means you're not getting Hawk or Fant or Hurst or Gesicki because they're all going in roughly the same range. So you're taking Jonnu instead of one of them in most leagues. So it's not just the cost of Jonnu, but also the cost of not getting one of them. But I think that's all we have for sleepers today. Let's do a quick beer check. Still on number one?
I'm at about here on 2.
Oh.
I
think Frankie wins.
Is that 2 for you?
Yeah.
I'm definitely out of the. I'm out of the contention this week.
Quick Rochambeau for it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Rock, paper, scissors for the.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Frankie got him. In case the camera didn't catch Frankie's hand, it was scissors.
So basically, my rant here is going to be going back to my whole Damien Harris thing. You want to draft for safety this year. You want to draft with guys who are opting out and guys who are injury prone. You want to kind of just take all that into account when you're even picking those late guys. Guys who are injury prone, or whether it's, we'll say like Dalvin Cook. You might want to take a late guy, like Alexander Madison, just so you have that handcuff for Dalvin. Or I think handcuffs this year, especially for those injury prone guys like Leonard Fournette, we'll say David Johnson, maybe even more important this year because of, not only that injury risk, but they may just be like, oh, well, I had a surgery or something. I've had injury risk in the past. They may just be like, well, I'm going to take a season off and recruit. Even we look at the Patriots defense, like guys who have been perfectly healthy are like, nah, I'm not playing in 2020. So you need to look at 1, the injury risk, and 2, once August 4th hits, all those guys who are opting out, and then run your draft around that. And I don't really have too much more to say on it. I typically do this from year to year. I know you disagree, Ian, but I like having handcuffs just in case.
Yeah, I think handcuffs are a waste of a draft pick.
I typically don't take them if they're super early. Like, I'm not going to take the Kareem Hunt to Nick Chubb, but I'm probably going to take the A.J. Dillon to Aaron Jones.
Oh, see, Kareem Hunt is probably the only handcuff I would take because he provides standalone value.
Fair enough.
All right, well, that'll do it for our sleeper episode today. We thank you for sticking with us, and if you haven't signed up for our giveaway yet, make sure you get that in because how many days are in July? Is it 31?
This is your last chance. It's July.
Yeah,
29th.
you have like a day when this video comes out to sign up for the giveaway, and then at that point it's gone. It's August. You're too late. So get those sign-ups in there, and we hope to see you in the comments. Talk to us about how we did. Who are some of your favorite sleepers? Let us know.
Yeah.
All right. See you guys next week.
Finger guns.
I missed a dad joke. I could have done see you guys next month.
I'm still recording, right?
Yeah, you can put that in there.
Yeah, I'm going to leave that there.
Scoodoodle.